My name is Jake, and welcome to another episode of my vlog. I'm going to be talking about ICRC and one of the biggest assignments that I kind of went on that sort of really sealed my fate in wanting to become a war photographer. So I went on a trip with a journalist called Nemra. She was married to a guy who worked for the British Embassy. I think he was first secretary or something like that. And she came over to work on stories, and she didn't she couldn't really stay at embassy, but I think they fixed something up in the end because it was either that or stay at the skater stand house, and she couldn't do that. So they worked something out for her in the end. But yeah, we went and spent 2 weeks in Kandahar at Mirwais Hospital with ICRC to do a story for Channel 4. And we went during the time of Operation Panther Claw, and that was a big operation because the British had assistance with the American troops to fight in Helmand. Now, this caused a lot of civilian deaths that were coming to Kandahar to get help. And so it would take about 6 hours for any sort of medical sort of like assistant from Helmand to Kandahar. So a lot of people didn't make it along the way. I'm going to probably put a graphic warning for some of the content people might see. There's obviously death of children, and then you'll see injured people. But packed. We spent a great amount of time basically just going to emergency wards and trying to catch people coming in with the wounded and try and hear their stories. Now, the Mirwais Hospital had ICRC as sort of additional external staff to help out with the conflict and dealing with wounded civilians, but also teach the Afghan staff how to assess, obviously, medical procedures and what to look out for and what was major injuries. So we covered a lot of children being injured. And I always remember there was this one man who came rushing in on a motorbike with his son, and his son was actually dead. And he was at the triage, and they checked his pulse, and there was nothing they could do for him. And he just grabbed the child and then walked down the stairs and got onto his motorbike and just drove away. Didn't say anything, just took it all in and just took his child. That was pretty hard to see. Saying that, we covered. There was this particular story which probably changed my perspective on the war, and that was there was this boy, and he was getting both his legs amputated, and he was quite conscious while this was happening, and I ended up filming him, and he was like looking at me, and he was smiling. I found that really odd. And later on, I got to speak to him with a translator. I asked him how he was and how he was doing, and I asked him why was he smiling, and he said, because today God decided that I would be able to live. This kid had stepped on a landmine basically and blew off pretty much both his legs. They both required amputation. Later down the track, this boy was given a bike for the handicapped to sort of ride around on. And I met up with him like a week later. And this bike was just on loan just to sort of see if it was for him. He obviously didn't have the money for this bike. But one of my friends, Samantha Page, she was my ex-girlfriend. She actually saw some of the photos that I was posting and gave me the money to be able to buy him a trike that he could use for disabled people. And so I bought this bike for him, and he was over the moon. And I wanted to sort of say that like years later, about 4 years later, I went back to Kandahar, and I had this picture of this boy, And I asked the staff if they knew him, and he had been going to the disabled basketball team and the training. And so, yeah, I was able to give the print of the photo to him. And that was a real highlight to sort of see him receive this photo and just see his progress. And he was still happy about life. He took every opportunity he had and made it something. Like, a lot of people would probably be depressed or be sad, basically, this tragedy. And he wasn't. And he was absolutely, I've been wounded and I'm just going to power through and keep on going. And he utilized that bicycle, this trike, and got more parts welded so he could sell bits and bobs on it. So, you could buy cigarettes off him or gum or lollies. It was all attached to his trike. And he made some money that way. And then, on the week and stuff, he would go to training in Kandahar for the basketball team. And that was amazing. That was an amazing thing that I'd seen. The ICRC in the hospital, they take in, whoever is wounded. So you actually do probably see the Taliban, basically sharing a bed next to somebody who's in the ANA, in the Afghan National Army. And this is the sort of saying is that, you can't bring guns or weapons into the hospital. You can't go and take wounded people out. It's a place of protection and a place of healing. And I've often seen, especially in other countries, this rule of law being broken. But in the Mirwais Hospital, it was pretty much a safe place for all to be taken care of, regardless of where you were in the conflict or what you saw or who you sided with. But a lot of the people that came in were children and working and seeing children, and we spent so much time waiting around for the next injured people that I'd often end up playing with these kids or just, drawing things on the wall or, just entertaining them. And the kids loved it. There was this bar as well at the ICRC compound, and I ended up being a bartender there and just serving people different cocktails and drinks and, keeping it alive and stuff. And I remember there was a pool, and Nema couldn't swim. And so I was teaching this rather tall Sudanese British woman how to swim in this pool. And he said, what if I get nervous and stuff? It's like, you are so tall that if you stand up, you can realize that you are actually standing up from the bottom of the pool and up. So, you can do this. And so, she'd learn how to swim in this pool in Kandahar. And I remember I also got really sick, and I was out of it for 2 days, and I wasn't really totally sure if I had meningitis or it was a really dangerous fever, and it knocked me out for 2 days. And the medical staff all brought me medicine, so I was well looked after. But I almost felt paralytic. But it was an amazing trip, and it ended up leading to our next adventure, which was Somalia, which will definitely be another vlog episode. I wanted to sort of say that the photos that I took during that time, these photos were actually seen by British commanders and soldiers, and they actually saw the video, and also the photos, and they asked me about the experience and the situation and things that I saw. So it helped a lot with the sort of policy and having an understanding of what the war was about. So it was really great to see the power of what photojournalism could do. It got you into a room with very powerful people that could make decisions on the conflict and what to be wary of, and where, the injured civilians and how they were being wounded and their cases. A lot of stray fire through buildings was the problem. Obviously, landmines were a problem. And also, the main problem was the fear. Like, you have a lot of single mothers, and the fear to try and get to a hospital for their babies who are suffering malnutrition. And also, they're in fear, so they're not producing milk and not being able to lactate. And so, the baby's not getting enough nutrients, is malnutrition. The pediatric hospital section, you literally have 3 or 4 babies sharing the same cot that really need nutrition and better health. But these mothers, they're afraid of traveling alone, or they need a companion that can take them, a male companion to take them to the hospital. And that's the really hard bit. But also through that trip, I met this woman, Karen Wu. Karen Wu was she was a surgeon, and she was a friend of another friend, and she was really keen to hear my stories, and she really wanted to come to Afghanistan. And in a way, I convinced her to come, like not to be afraid of what you may see, or that there is problems and there is conflict. There are people that need your help, and if you're able to give it, you should come. And she did. It actually led to her, unfortunately, demise. She did have a few years in Afghanistan, and she met an amazing guy, Paddy. And unfortunately, she was killed in Nuristan. And her story is quite tragic. And part of me started feeling this guilt, I guess, of basically allowing people or inspiring people to go and do things that would lead to their ultimate sort of end. And I'm always trying to encourage people to get past this fear and get past this thing, an adventure, and see the world and do good if you can. But it was really hard to know about the outcome. I really wanted to go to that trip, and I couldn't because my visas had problems and I was stuck in India. But that's another story. And I didn't get back in time for that trip. And then I remember hearing the news that Karen Wu had been killed. And so was a whole bunch of other sort of, I guess, Christian missionaries that had lived in Afghanistan. that worked for several other NGOs, eye surgeons, some people who had been living there for years, decades. It was a really sad story. And it's one of the things that I probably regret for the rest of my life. But yeah, the Mirwais Hospital story and adventure, I could see the work that I did, and it made me enthusiastic to keep on telling stories of injustice and to try to be able to speak to people who had power, and I could talk about what I had seen. Later on in my life, I was able to speak to Barack Obama. I've spoken to Julie Bishop, and I've spoken to about things that I'd seen. I could see that this is why we do what we do and the risks that we take, in the hope that we can change policy. Anyway, this is me just signing out of this vlog, and I'll put this all together. I really hope that you're actually enjoying this and you're following my story. It's kind of lethargic to sort of talk about it, and also if I don't talk about these things out loud and I don't say these things, things get bottled up, and it's probably better to always speak truth and to always speak honestly about the things that you've seen and the things that you've done, the regrets. So yeah, I'm going to leave you here. I'm going to edit this and put this up together, and I hope that you are enjoying the journey, and I would like to continue and follow more. I'm going to talk about something probably more happier for the next vlog. I'm going to talk about Skateistan again, and then I'll get to Somalia. All right, I'll catch you later.
It's Thursday, and the morning rush has started. Already several cars have pulled up outside Mirwais Hospital's emergency unit here in Kandahar. This one brought Hasina and her sister. They were playing outside their home when they were hit by a driver swerving to avoid a coalition convoy. The convoy never stopped. Passers-by brought them here. The girls were suffering from shock.
In the week we've spent at Mirwais Hospital, there's been a constant flood of civilian casualties. And not just here, throughout Afghanistan, this summer is shaping up to be the deadliest for civilians since the conflict began.
While Operation Panther's Claw has been trying to push the Taliban out of their strongholds in southern Afghanistan, the injured civilians have been flooding here. We came to Mirwais in the last week of July, a month into the British offensive, to see what life has been like for the people caught in the crossfire, the people central to NATO's efforts to win hearts and minds. This is the intensive care unit, the ICU where the most critical patients are brought. They're mainly war wounded.
He's from yesterday from gunshot wound, from one of the districts of Kandahar.
Is it always this full?
Yeah, always the bed is full. This is all from last night, some emergency cases which was operated at the ICU. It's not well equipped ICU. We have simple monitor.
Civilian casualties in Afghanistan have become the major operational issue for British and US forces. Soldiers have been ordered to show restraint if there is even the slightest risk of a civilian presence. But tell that to this man. On the night of July 16th, Haj Ni'matullah says he and his family were asleep in their home in Shawalakot district, north of Kandahar city. They were woken by a coalition attack on his village.
نو زه خپل جلا و بیا چې وروسته وو موږ یې نه ویشتلي دوی وویشتله دوی چې وویشتله د دوی سره بغارې شوې تایرې چې تېر شوې ما ورته راولګول د عجزو کوچنیان
Ne'matullah's eldest son, Muhammad, is lying in a bed in the ward next door. He agrees to let us film him, but is unable to answer any of our questions. His 4-year-old daughter was killed by the first strike as the family tried to escape their burning homes. Another one of Ne'matullah's sons is lying in a separate ward. He takes us to meet him. Qadratullah is 13 years old. He was irreversibly brain damaged by the bomb that killed his niece. In a country like Afghanistan with no way to get meaningful rehabilitation for your loved ones, brain damage is a life sentence, as much for those afflicted as for their carers. His father is understandably bitter. Over our 7 days at the hospital, we spent every morning by the emergency unit's entrance, watching dozens of injured war victims arriving, many escaping from the heart of the conflict in Helmand. Patients brought by ambulance are rare here. People arrive in whatever they can find and whatever they can afford. Often, they have to help themselves into the hospital. But in addition to the aerial bombs and the mortar blasts, there is another silent threat: fear. Shamsullah has been brought in by his father suffering from dehydration after days of diarrhea. The doctors crowd around the toddler's bed. His father looks on as they try to revive him. But it's too late. He's wrapped in a shroud and taken to the morgue. Shamsullah's parents were too afraid to risk the journey to Mirwais, with the ever-present threat of violence. They waited in the hope their child would recover. It's a story we hear over and over from parents here.
This is the general pediatric ward. And coming in here, you can see how overcrowded it is. There are 2 or 3 children to every bed.
Throughout our time here, the pediatric ward was where we always saw the most harrowing scenes. Every morning, the hospital runs a feeding clinic, and malnourished children are brought in, often by equally malnourished mothers. Despite the billions of dollars pouring into Afghanistan, the country ranks number 2 in the world for infant deaths. The same ranking as in 1990 at the end of the war with the Soviets. After 8 years, there is little evidence of the massive development spend. And as the conflict escalates, the malnutrition rates have climbed with it, pushing up mortality figures. This family traveled 2 days to bring their 8-year-old son here from Helmand. It's a trip that would usually take a few hours, but they had to detour around the Panther's Claw offensive. He's been suffering from meningitis and was immediately admitted.
They are coming late to us. That is why there is no security, so they have to wait till the time they can come. Because many times they are fighting on the road, and they are screaming from the road bombs and these kind of things. So they wait. In the end stage they come to us.
Unable to walk, he's carried to a hospital bed. When we left, it wasn't clear whether he would survive the night. Of course, it's not just the coalition inflicting casualties. This year, for the first time, over 50% of civilian deaths recorded by the UN were caused by Taliban roadside bombs and suicide attacks. The injured man on the stretcher, Bismillah Rahmatullah, was sweeping for old Soviet-era mines when a roadside bomb went off. An Afghan army ambulance was nearby, and the paramedics began treatment. But it wasn't enough. Rahmatullah had lost too much blood. They arrived too late. Muhammad Anwar was also the victim of a Taliban attack. The 11-year-old fruit seller lost his legs to a roadside bomb. But he seemed to take a lot of joy in his new mode of transport. And for his elders, in the face of their loss, he became an unofficial mascot. It's easy to forget that the ones who make it here are the lucky ones. This hospital has been supported by the Red Cross since 1996. So unlike many of the country's other hospitals, the medicines are to international standard and the generator doesn't run out of fuel. This July, the hospital registered a 50% jump in civilian casualties.
We're getting around 700 inpatients a day, 600 are being discharged, so we're having 100 patients extra that stay in the hospital. There are some wards that are around 140, 150, even 175% of the bed occupancy. So we're really having a lot of inpatients.
There are 20 Red Cross trained surgeons here, able to perform 700 operations every month. They're currently running at capacity, with the majority of surgeries performed on those injured in the fighting. And they're still coming. For 1 week, we witnessed what the staff here have dealt with for the years of the NATO presence. It's been 2 weeks since we left this hospital, and although the first stage of the British offensive in Helmand has been declared a success, we've been told that the influx of the wounded and the dying into Mirwais continues relentlessly. Ne'em al-Bagher, Channel 4 News, Kandahar.